الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله فإن الله عز وجل مع المتقين وبعد. We have been informed and have seen this week that there has been, to use the term being used in public, a ceasefire agreement between Ahl Gaza and the Zionist state, the occupational entity that is Israel. And firstly and foremostly, of course, we should not set ourselves up to be let down. Do not expect that the Zionists are going to keep to their agreement, because from their nature is that they are a people who, to use the word stab in the back is not befitting of them, but they are a people that cannot be trusted. The Zionists, they lie, they break oaths, they break trusts. In fact, there is no such thing as trust with those people. There is no amana that they have, nor karama. And so we should not set ourselves up to be disappointed when we find that they have broken the so-called agreement that they have engaged in. And of course, we hope for a lengthy duration of what is being referred to as peace for Ahlul Gaza, because of course they have suffered more than enough. But we should not expect it. Secondly, it is not a time to forget about the situation, nor to forget about the situation of the Ummah. And it's important that we remind ourselves that the situation of Palestine, the situation of Gaza, is one of the situations or one example of many that we need to pay attention to within our Ummah, and they are all linked together. And perhaps Palestine is the pinnacle or the peak of the state of our situation as an Ummah today. And the reason for that, of course, the emotional attachment to that place. The fact that it was the place wherein the Prophet ﷺ, or the place from, I should say, the Prophet ﷺ traveled to the heavens, where Salah was obligated, where the Prophet ﷺ led the other prophets and messengers. The first Qibla and the third holy site for our Ummah, and likewise a holy site for the Christians, a holy site for the sincere amongst the Banu Israel. And so we have to remind ourselves that this is not a time to return back to the dunya that we were perhaps engaged in prior to the situation, and unfortunately throughout the situation, to be honest. But it's a time for reflection, and it's also a time for preparation. It's a time for preparation. A time wherein we need to look at what is happening in our ummah and understand that there is no short-term solution. There is no short-term solution. And this is one of the issues of our day, that we have become used to short-term gratification, short-term pleasure, short-term investment and profit. Everything we do, we want to do it in the quickest way possible with the quickest results. Education likewise. We want to study for a few hours and become scholars and knowledgeable people and so on and so forth. But the reality of our situation, our ummah, there is no short-term solution. And it can be argued, for this reason, the Prophet ﷺ's mission went on for over 20 years. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to teach us and remind us that the mission of guidance, the mission of revelation, the mission of spiritual, physical, mental liberation takes time. And there are no shortcuts. And every time you look to the history of Islam and you find a champion that has been and is being celebrated by our ummah, you have to understand that behind that champion there is a process that took place. When we take fruit from the tree, we enjoy the fruit without thinking about the process that tree went through in order to give that fruit that we are now nourishing ourselves with. Likewise with our ummah. And the ulama of our history, the scholars of Islamic history, they say that from the qualities of our history, from the qualities of our existence in comparison to the other nations of believers, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives victory to the ummah of Islam through its men and women. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives victory to Islam through the men and women of Islam. Meaning, if we want to see success and victory for our ummah, we have to stand up and be proponents of that success and victory that we envisage. It's not going to come on its own. And so we have to take time now to reflect. How can we contribute towards the actual liberation? Not a moment of peace and quiet, no. Not a moment of peace and quiet. That is going to be temporary. We will see. Personally, I am certain that it's not going to last. Because the Zionist entity has shown us too many times their reality. And so we do not want a moment of peace for Ahlul Gaza. No, we want complete liberation for Gaza and Palestine. That is our goal as Muslims. We want complete liberation for the Ummah of Islam. That is our goal as Muslims. We want complete liberation for non-Muslims. That is our goal as Muslims. So how do we achieve that? It's very easy, as has been mentioned many times from this minbar. It's very easy to point fingers and say, so-and-so are doing this to us. It's so-and-so's fault. Where are the United Nations? Where are so-and-so? Where's this organization? Where are the rights activists of this group and that group? But we have enough individuals. We have enough resources. We have the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have His Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. We have enough to give ourselves what we're looking for without relying upon anyone else. And that's how it should be. It's very easy to point fingers. But the fingers that need to be pointed should be towards ourselves. To ask, what have we done? What are we doing? What can we do? And so here are some points to reflect upon. Number one, if we would like to see the liberation of Palestine, the liberation of the Ummah of Islam, the liberation of non-Muslims, then we have to first liberate and free ourselves from the dunya. That's it. It's very simple. It's very simple. One of the late scholars and thinkers of Islam, he said, if a person would like to cure the sick, he first has to elevate himself from the sicknesses of the society within which those people live. If a person wants to alleviate the sick, they have to alleviate themselves first from the sicknesses that they seek to address. If I have a flu, I can't go and treat someone else with a flu. We're simply exchanging the flu with each other. Likewise, if I seek to liberate the Ummah of Islam, the lands of Islam, how can I liberate the Ummah and the lands of Islam if I myself am enslaved to the dunya and its pleasures? It's not possible. It's not possible. And you read through the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, and you have the greatest example of this. You have the greatest example. The Sahaba. What's the difference between the Sahaba and those that came after them? Of course, many differences, virtues, etc. But what's the difference? Internal difference. They had freed themselves completely from this dunya. Completely. The famous statement. What's the famous statement? That we have been sent to free mankind from enslavement to man and take them to the servitude of Allah. And to take them from the narrowness of this dunya to the vastness of this dunya. Meaning, free yourself from the narrowness and open the horizon up for yourself. The only way you can do that is if you've liberated yourself from this life. But instead, what do we do today? What are we doing? We are running after the dunya in the name of Islam and then crying about the situation of the ummah. Running from this dunya. Running to the dunya, and crying about those who are oppressing us. And the example, and forgive me because it might be an offensive one. The example, a person who is unfit, a person who doesn't spend any time looking after himself, complaining about the strong person who's oppressing him. Yeah, there's some blame in the oppression taking place, but learn to defend yourself. Learn to defend yourself. Put some time into your physical fitness. That's our state as an ummah today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ وَلَا تَعْدُ عَيْنَاكَ عَنْهُمْ تُرِيدُ زِينَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to the Prophet ﷺ, He said, be patient with those who call upon their Lord in the mornings and the evenings. Do not turn away from them. Do not be tempted by those whom we have given this dunya. And so the first and the most important point, if we want to liberate Palestine, we want to liberate mankind, we have to liberate ourselves. And you cannot liberate yourself from this dunya as long as you are running after this dunya. To requote Imam Al-Ghazali, he said, rahimahullah, the akhirah and dunya are like the east and the west. You cannot travel to both at the same time. Make your mind up. You travel towards the east, you're traveling away from the west. You travel towards the west, you're traveling away from the east. Which one do you want? Which one would you like to travel to? The akhirah or the dunya? If you want the akhirah, you have to give up the dunya. If you want the dunya, you have to give up the akhirah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He say? إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَمْوَالَهُمْ بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةِ. Allah has purchased from the believers their lives and their wealth for the price of paradise. You cannot have both. You cannot have both. You cannot have wealth without hard work. Today, some are convinced that they can. Likewise, you cannot have akhirah without selling the dunya. Today, some are convinced that you can. And some of us, we're stuck in the middle. We're stuck in the middle, playing this game. We want dunya and akhirah. Rich and righteous. It doesn't work like that. It's not to suggest that you cannot be wealthy and righteous, but the righteous, wealthy person is not attached to his wealth. The wealthy person who is righteous is not attached to the wealth. Reality. The second point, if we really want to liberate Palestine and the lands of Islam and the Muslimin and the non-Muslims, we have to educate ourselves. We have to educate ourselves. And it's not an education which is the type of education we're seeing today. The perfection of pronunciation and the ability to quote a hadith and ayat, etc. without application. No, it is an internal education which leads to external fruits. It is an internal education which leads to external fruits. This is what the Sahaba went through. They said, تعلمنا الإيمان ثم تعلمنا القرآن. They said, at first we learned Iman and then we learned Quran. Today we're going to the Quran without Iman. And we're seeing this in the impact of this in the behavior of those who have studied the Quran and ahadith and fiqh and so on and so forth. We have to educate ourselves. And not only ourselves, but our children. We have to raise a generation that are only concerned with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the akhirah. No matter where Allah places them, that's what they are concerned with. That was the Sahaba. That's the difference between us and the Sahaba. That's the difference between every generation whom Allah granted victory to and the generations that were not granted victory. Their sole want in this life was the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the establishment of that which pleases Allah azza wa jal. That was it. Us, we run after our nufus. We run after our desires. As long as it's halal, we justify it. The halalification of haram lifestyles. Halalification of haram lifestyles, halal components, haram living. Gluttonous, but it's halal, so it's okay. Indulging in haram with halal components, so it's okay. Greed, halal, it's okay. Even we see the way that we treat relationships, halalified, so it's okay. In Jahiliyyah, a person will have multiple relationships, haram. How do we halalify it? Let's make it wives that are married. It's okay, halal now. But it's a haram lifestyle. You're running after the dunya. Running after the dunya and then expecting what? A different result? We need to focus on the Arabic language so we understand our deen. We need to understand fiqh, yes, but so that it purifies our inner selves. Aqeedah, yes, but in a practical way. Not so that we can argue and bicker and differentiate between ourselves, determine who's from the people of haqq and who's from the people of batil. No. A practical application of aqeedah. So that we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our lives and we fear Him in our lives. We depend upon Him for our strength. We realize our weakness comes from ourselves. A practical application of aqeedah and a practical understanding of aqeedah. Quran. We don't need the perfection of the recitation alone. Perfection of the recitation with application of that which is involved in its recitation. A holistic approach. Number 3. Number 1, being cutting ourselves off from this dunya. Number 2, education in the deen. Number 3, education in dunya. If I would like to build a house, memorizing the Quran is not going to help me. If I would like to build a house, being a hafiz of Bukhari and Muslim and so on and so forth is not going to help me. I need expertise in house building. And so we have to look at the situation of our ummah today and ask, what do we need in order to establish that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and go into those fields. We should not be looking at it and saying, what do I need in order to earn the most money? Which is what many of us say. Many of us, we instruct our children, look at the career path from the perspective of income. How much can you earn? No. We need to change the culture and the mindset. Look at the career path. How can you use it to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How can you use this career path to establish that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this is fard kafa'i, by the way. This is a collective duty. As Imam Al-Ghazali discusses in his Ihya, he says that it is wajib, obligatory upon a community to have that which is necessary for the existence and the growth of that believing community. If we do not have doctors, we are sinning because we need doctors. Today, what do we need? We have to look at it, ask, and then send people into those fields. Number 4, and this one is not number 4 because it's not as important. In fact, it's one of the most important. Something that has been stressed many times. Unity. Unity. As was mentioned last week, one ayah is sufficient. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs us towards unity. In this verse, multiple times. وَاعْتَصِمُوا وَاوُ الْجَمَاعَةِ وَاعْتَصِمُوا أَيُّهَا الْمُسْلِمُونَ. You, believers. Not وَاعْتَصِم, which is for the singular. No, وَاعْتَصِمُوا, collective. بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Emphasis, جَمِيعًا. Then وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and do not divide, which is the opposite of being collectively united. Again, emphasis. And some may suggest بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ, it means على الحق. لا, بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ, there are different interpretations for the haqq. As long as they are within the framework of Ahl Sunnah, no problem. Unity does not require or necessitate uniformity. I do not have to agree with you in everything in order to be united with you. And you find this was the way of the Sahaba. This was the way of the Sahaba. And they discussed their differences. They came together. They met in the middle. If we would like to be successful, we have to be united. And any individual who seeks to disunite our ummah in this day and age is one of two. As was mentioned last week, either they are unintelligent to be polite, or an agent, whether they know it or they do not know it. Anyone who seeks to disunite our ummah in this day and age is one of two. Unintelligent to be polite, or an agent, whether they know or they do not know that they are an agent. If they are not an actual agent of those who wish to see the fall of Islam, then they are being manipulated by those who do want to see the fall of Islam. And being an agent, what falls under that? Under that, munafiq. And remember, the munafiq is not going to look different from the ummah of Islam. The munafiq will look like the Muslim. The munafiqun during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba looked like the Sahaba in their appearance. And so we have to be wise. What falls under unity as well? Removing all of the isms from within our ranks. Tribalism, racism, manhajism. Any ism which is not conducive to the unity of Islam should be removed. To recap, number one, remove our attachment to this dunya. That's the first hurdle. No success will be granted unless that is the case. Number two, educate ourselves in deen and in dunya. Number three, to remove from ourselves disunity and to come together collected, united upon the goal that we all agree upon, which is to establish that which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده صلوات ربي وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء ومن تبعه وبعد. To conclude, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed us in a position of resourcefulness. We have so much within our ummah, strength of body, strength of mind, intelligence, wealth. Up until this point, there are individuals that use that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them for His pleasure, but it seems the majority of us, we use the opportunities we have been provided for individualistic needs. Dunya. For dunya, we need to change it. We need to look at the world, the dunya that Allah has granted us, that which is around us, and start to utilize it for His sake. For His sake. This life is a test. Real life starts in the next life. وَمَنْ يُقْرِضَ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا. Who will give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a beautiful qard, a loan if you like. And when you give a loan, you receive back that which you've given. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us life back, but it's an eternal life. You give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala your life, your time, your wealth, your health, your mind, your resources. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give it back to you, multiplied by an amount that we cannot comprehend in the akhirah. That's what this life is for. And those are the successful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from them. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وارض اللهم عن أبي بكر وعن عمر وعن عثمان وعن علي وعن سائر الصحابة أجمعين اللهم تب علينا واعف عنا إنك أنت العفو الكريم اللهم انصر إخواننا في أنحاء العالم يا رب العالمين اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم اجعلنا من الناصرين للإسلام اللهم ارفع راية الإسلام واجعلنا من الرافعين له اللهم عليك بأعداء الدين وأعدائك يا رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة. Tap.